Okay. I think we're ready to get going up here, so who used the hand trick last time? That seemed to work quite well. Oh, there you are. Aren't you beautiful? Thank you. So everyone, sit down and put your hand up to show that you agree. We're about to have a silent period so that... Oh, fantastic. Love you all. My name's Elizabeth and I'm with Stop Aukus, WA. We're going to have a conversation with you today about some of our work here. But before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Boodja and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also recognise the ongoing connection with land and sea, which we heard from Dorinda, it's over 30,000 years. And sovereignty, of course, was never ceded. It always was and it always will be Aboriginal land. So just to let you know how the session's going to run, we're going to have about 30-35 minutes of all of these Aukus WA activists to sort of talk about the campaign foci that we've had so far and some of our highlights. And then that'll be followed by 20 minutes of Q&A. So I'd first like to invite Leonie to give us a brief summary of Aukus Pillar 1, specifically around HMAS Stirling. Leonie, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you to the previous speakers of this session organised by Stop Aukus, which has been incredibly informative and given us something really solid to bounce off. In terms of Aukus Pillar 1 and its specific relevance and impact on HMAS Stirling, so just quickly announced in 2023 as part of the optimal pathway, the key points were the 8 million of upgrades at HMAS Stirling, the infrastructure of the wharf, the dredging that was needed, and also to build the CIF, the Controlled Industrial Facility, for the storage of supposedly low-level waste. We've just had a visit from the USS Hawaii, being the first US submarine, muchly touted as being the first maintenance exercise here in Australia with Australian crew. The also announced was the SRF rotations, which are specific to HMAS Stirling, due to start as of 2027, whereby up to 4 US Virginia class and 1 UK Astute will be on rotation. This has come, the US subs will be on rotation under the Force Posture Agreement, yet to be determined though whether Stirling is an actual agreed facility and area, which gives the US much more control. Most of us assume that it will be, but we are still chasing actual confirmation of that. And then, of course, HMAS Stirling envisaged as the home port of the supposed 2 second-hand, then 1 newly built US Virginia class subs, if they ever arrive, as a stopgap, basically, before the building of the new UK-Australia joint design SSN Aukus in Oslo. Up to you, Olivia.
Back to me. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how Stop Aukus WA started. It evolved from a meeting initiated by IPAN WA, and I'm pretty sure it was in this building actually, and it was in response to the initial announcement of Aukus in September 2021. At Stop Aukus WA is comprised of a group of folk from 6 different political parties, Quakers, peace and anti-nuclear campaigners, union activists and students. And we've got active fairly quickly, I think, and it's been a really sort of nice group to be working in, even though we've got a terrible job to do. And we're also a member of the Australian Anti-Aukus Coalition, and that was, I think, similarly set up in the way that we set up as well. The Australian Anti-AUKUS Coalition launched a campaign. A letter opposing AUKUS since then has garnered 1,400 signatures, and there's also been national actions, but we also realise that different areas have different circumstances, and so there's sometimes some different campaign priorities. And just on that, well, we'll give you an overview of the focus in WA. I'd first like to welcome and invite Luke from the Wollongong Against War and Nukes, who's online, to give us a quick background and update of the Wildland campaign and share with us on that. Thank you, Luke.
Okay, all right, 1 second. Sorry. Start share. Okay, participants, Luke. Luke. Okay.
Great, yeah. You can all hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm coming to you today from Darawal land. We've actually got our Palestine solidarity protest just happening, so if you hear really loud drums, I'll just have to move away. But, yeah, to give you an update, we actually, Wollongong Against War and Nukes, we were set up at a very similar time, so immediately after the AUKUS announcement, a coalition of socialists, peace activists, and then, you know, a bunch of student activists and union activists got together to organise a campaign group, especially because, you know, it was announced that we were on the shortlist to receive the nuclear submarine base just down the road in Port Kembla here. And since then, the most, you know, spectacular kind of thing that we've been involved in was the union organised huge May Day march that happened here last year, where it was, you know, thousands of trade unionists from the Illawarra, some down from Sydney, marched to, you know, demand the ripping up of the AUKUS treaty and to have, you know, the money that's going to be spent on nuclear submarines to be spent on things that are good for working class people like healthcare, welfare and education. And that was really great. But I think that it's worth, you know, just reflecting on that came in the context of Wollongong Against War and Nukes, a much smaller campaign group, you know, made up predominantly of the left, that planted the flag. And I think that's what allowed the union movement, you know, and the union leaders who, you know, were concerned about different things. Some of them were concerned about renewable energy jobs in the region, and some of them had a more, you know, left-wing political critique of AUKUS, like the Teachers Federation, who are principally opposed. Yeah, even though obviously none of their members will get jobs or lose jobs based on this particular proposal. But this year it's been a bit more difficult for us because the government, you know, pretending that they're dropping it, it's pretty clear that they are still considering Port Kembla as a base, but they've, you know, saying that they're not going to do anything until not this election, but the next. And so we've had to take a bit of a different approach. We've got kind of 2 calendar events that it's now, you know, established that every year there will be a protest against the Defence Industry Conference in the Illawarra, no matter where it is. And we got, you know, around 100 people to that this year, so that's really good. And we have a Hiroshima Day forum to commemorate, you know, the atom bomb being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and demanding an end to nuclear war and nuclear altogether. So, yeah, we aim to keep the campaign group alive and to be reactive as things come out. But yeah, I think this is definitely a campaign that needs to be from coast to coast. So it's great to be here with you guys today. And it's great to see that you're having this meeting, Solidarity from the East Coast.
Thank you, Luke, and much solidarity to you all over there. Okay, back to WA. We have a pretty close collaboration here with Nuclear Free WA, which we are super appreciative of. This is specific to the campaign against Pillar 1, of course, and that is the AUKUS nuclear propelled submarines. And as indicated in some of the pics, if
Oh, sorry.
we get the pics.
Yep, they're coming. Okay, yes.
I'll just keep talking meanwhile at that time.
Thank you.
But anyway, as indicated, we quite often do joint actions both with Nuclear Free WA, IPAN, and on many occasions with MAPW, which is great. So we work across protests, grassroots community engagement, letter writing, for media outlets, stalls, local councils and submissions. A few of those things will be covered by our folk here. And we're very fortunate to have a wonderful veteran campaigner and banner artiste, Judy. She does amazing magic with her signs and churns out banners and signs that are new for every new protest, which really helps us in terms of messaging and also attracting attention. So that's great. We've evolved to have about 120 who've expressed interest in organising, although in terms of 10 meetings, there's usually only about 20 close to that have the capacity. We have a newsletter of 350 and an increasing following on our social platforms of Facebook, Instagram and X. Nuclear will also enable us to have a page on their website and also to be able to use the online shop facility and the Action Network in order to get our newsletters out. So it might seem small for folk movements from the east, but hey, this is the west, and those of you who were able to go to Rockingham Venture yesterday would perhaps have noticed that it is quite a Brits expat town and pretty hard to crack. So great appreciation to our Rockingham campaigners who are also growing in numbers and have been doing a great job. And the anti-war support base there, in terms of the growing base, is really a result of the hard work that a lot of them have put into it, especially with concerns over the impacts of housing, the already congested roads, stretched health, education and other social services. Part of the initial announcement was that there would be an influx of 700 submariners and support crew and their families. That figure has now grown to 1,000, and then I just recently heard 3,000, which is pretty horrendous. Most of the singles that are being accommodated on the base, the rest families obviously want to be able to live on the mainland and for the kids to go to school and to have all of the access there. But a lot of the housing is actually run by Defence Security Estates Group, and hence there is another problem of them buying up huge masses of land and competing very heavily with locals wanting to buy into the housing market, so that's pretty bad. Cracking mainstream media in WA is pretty difficult because we have several independent local papers, but it's largely monopolised on the mass front by Seven West Media, who owns the only West Australian daily paper, Sunday Times, Channel 7, and Perth Now online and local papers, as well as the only local paper in Rockingham. So eat your heart out, Murdoch. Online WA Today and 6PR, of course, are owned by Nine, similarly to The Age and Sydney Morning Herald. We maintain that the advancement of Aukus Pillar 2, including the submersibles, robotics and space technologies, which we understand are pretty far advanced in WA, will render the submarines obsolete, even if we ever get them, which seems increasingly less likely, but the damage has been done. In regard to key objectives, apart from shared objectives to campaign for a nuclear-free Indo-Pacific and against the drive to war on China, to stop, sink AUKUS, a key immediate aim is to block the SIF, the waste storage site, from going ahead. Because without the SIF, the rotations in 2027 cannot take place. And this has been confirmed on several occasions. And of course, we aim to increase awareness of the community, not only about the politics of AUKUS, but also the nuclear safety risks, especially in the most affected areas around Coburg and Sam. I'll hand over to Sam and Joe to expand on this.
Thanks very much, Leonie. So yes, as you gather, in Western Australia, it's not a question of where the nuclear submarines are going to be based. We already know that. It's going to be HMS Sterling. And in fact, it's not where they will be based. Effectively, they already are, because obviously British and American submarines are already on increased rotation as part of Force Posture Agreement. Now, one of the ways in which we've sought to push the campaign against AUKUS, and the submarines in particular, is through petitions to our local governments, to all the local governments that actually border on Coburg and Sound. So I'll just very quickly read to you the 4 points of the petition that were presented to the City of Fremantle, and similar petitions going to the other local governments as well. The points of the petition were this. 1, call on the Commonwealth Government to ban the berthing of nuclear-powered or armed submarines at Stirling Naval Base, given its proximity to a large urban population. 2, explain how else it will respond to the fact that the nuclear-powered and nuclear-armed submarines in the Coburn Sound are inconsistent with the city's nuclear-free policy and pledge to support the treaty to ban nuclear weapons. And I should also add the fact that in the case of the City of Fremantle, that it's a member of Mayors for Peace. 3, ensure that residents and visitors are immediately informed of the presence of nuclear-powered and/or armed submarines, safety procedures in place and appropriate public response to accidents, including the provision of iodine tablets. And 4, seek clarification of the extent of its responsibilities in the event of a nuclear safety breach, which I just as an aside are actually described in state law. Now, a petition campaign by itself can be a fairly passive thing. People just sign the petition, which in activist terms is the bare minimum. And then you present the petition, and the receivers of the petition just put it in a circular filing cabinet, and that's it. In the case of this petition, we've really sought to engage our activists and local people. So we've been collecting petitions outside Fremantle Railway Station, at the community market days. So there's some farmers markets and community markets in Rockham and Fremantle, Coburn. Leonie's been collecting out at South Beach as people have gone for their morning or afternoon swim, that sort of stuff. The other thing we've done with the petition as well is very much sought to because we've had separate petitions, make sure the petitioners sign the relevant petition and are actually local. Now, in the era of the internet, it's easy to get people from Timbuktu or Arizona to sign your petition. It's fairly meaningless, But in the case of our petitions, we wanted the local councillors to see that nearly all of the people on the petition that was in front of them were people who actually live in their electorate, and to really, put it bluntly, put the blowtorch to their backside on this matter. For them to say, oh my goodness, the person who lives down the street from me or that person, that influential member of the community is there. So we run the petition that way, and also sought to tie the petition in with other campaigning and publicity and questions to council, the various councils about the issues that have been raised in the petition, and leverage publicity all along the way. Now, one thing, without stealing Joe's thunder, is just before we were, well, not just before, probably a month before we were getting ready to present the Fremantle petition, it was revealed that the mayors and CEOs of all our local governments bordering Coburn Sound, are going on a trip to the United States to see what it's like to coexist with nuclear powered and armed naval bases, basically. This is a real kick in the guts for us in Fremantle, I have to say, given our long history of being a nuclear-free city, and in fact, the mayor is someone that many of us have known and worked with personally. So that Joe will talk about it, but it's just a reflection of the fact, the extent to which the Australian Submarine Agency and all of the federal government is seeking to buy social licence and bind every sector of society and local government into the whole submarine building process. And we're all part of it, and even if you disagree with it, too bad, the caravan's moving on, let's get on board and make the best of it, rah, rah, rah. That's the whole kind of thing that they're trying to push. So it was very embarrassing for the Mayor of Fremantle that we presented our petition just as the fact that this trip was going ahead. And big kudos to Leonie for actually blowing it up on the front page of our local newspapers. So now the question for us is in the case of the Fremantle petition has been presented, it had just over 400 signatories, 95% of whom do actually live in the city of Fremantle, and the petitions will be presented at the other local government soon as well. Then, of course, the question for us is what do we do next to carry the campaign forward? And we still got a lot of work to do, really, in terms of educating the population. I'm reminded of this by the fact that there was the petition that was that was the linchpin of the campaign to get Fremantle declared a nuclear-free zone back in the 1980s. Now, I'm going on memory here, so don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure from the article I read is it had 14,000 signatories. So that's a mass campaign, a mass anti-nuclear campaign, of which I only have I only have the memories of as an 11-year-old going to those events, taken by my mum kind of thing. So but it should give us hope for the kind of campaign that we can build, that we need to build, and Joe might have some tips about that.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I have to say I've been doing some door knocking with these petitions. One was opposing my local government, Shire of Coburn, which put forward an unannounced motion of support for Aukus, completely out of the blue. It's nothing to do with them really, except they want some crumbs from the table, jobs. and also an accompanying petition about the junket, which I labelled a seduction safari. And it's not just local government. This cost $168,000 of ratepayers' money, by the way. And so when ratepayers heard that, they were very happy to sign that petition. They don't like being taken for a ride like that. $168,000. And they were going to look at things like homelessness in San Diego. We're thinking we've got plenty of homelessness here to look at, deal with that, please. But what I also discovered was that so many people said, oh, I don't know anything about it. I'd say, I live just around the corner. I now know where a submariner lives. I know where a Defence Department employee lives, just over the back fence from me. I feel like a spy collecting all this information, which may or may not be useful at some time. But it's amazing what people will reveal, at the door. And so some would refuse to sign the one that was generally against Aukus because they said, I know nothing about it. And I thought, well, where have you been living? Under a rock? We have had, as Sam and Leonie have alluded to, quite good local publicity in our local rags. We've been on the front page several times in the last few months, and still people don't know anything about it. Now, as Chris, my colleague, 3 people down, pointed out to me on the train coming in this morning that if that means that we're not doing so well because people aren't reading the local rag, but neither has the government's so-called consultation produced much information in the community. They've had these so-called consultations which are absolutely bullshit because they don't really tell much about it at all except produce some glossy pamphlets and say it's all going to be wonderful and, there are going to be more jobs. They don't mention any of the downsides, but obviously they're not doing terribly well either if so many locals have yet to hear about Aukus and the nuclear submarines. So that's our big job, to inform the public.
Thank you.
Another aspect of our campaigning is we've set up subgroups to further awareness and solidarity for ourselves as well as community engagement. In terms of the First Nations, a major focus has been obviously and is for us to support any First Nations concerns about Aukus, the storage of low-level foreign waste at HMAS Sterling, and of course the storage of highly enriched uranium reactor waste at our submarines. Have yet to be determined site, as has been covered in part and will be further tomorrow in this program. As Kelly Trunter recently mentioned, perhaps it is through the First Nations that the campaign against Aukus can be won. Something to really keep in mind. Handing over to Chris regarding the enviro groups, just a comment.
Good. Thank you, Leonie. We've heard in this meeting, and we see every night on the television, the effects of war on human well-being, or not so well-being, but also, of course, it has big effects on the environment, and the natural environment and what's left of the natural environment. And in WA we have a lot of environmental problems, and there are some very active environmental groups, and it occurred to us we should be working closer with those groups, but these other environmental groups are really overloaded in confronting, well, the WA government, Woodside, anti-fracking, forest destruction, everything like that. But it is our intention that we should link up with other environmental groups in advertising our activities and joining with them. We're very much joined with the Palestine groups, so we hope to amalgamate it a little bit better and cooperate better. Thank you. So over to, who's it, Vinny?
Got this one here. Thank you. I've been thinking, what can I say that is meaningful in a couple of minutes about unions in WA? Firstly, this has always been union business. We had from the past, we have a lot of experiences from the past, brothers and sisters from the ETU, they got a very effective and good policy on nuclear. which other unions could have the same policy. But unfortunately, we rank and file unions and run by the rank and file. And decisions that are made by unions, particularly union leadership, has to be backed up by the members. They pay union dues to secure jobs. And with 10% of union density in this country, 90% of non-union labour will build whatever the boss says. So it is a very critical thing, because for unions, safety is paramount. We need to defend and ensure that workers go home every day after each shift. Only 2 days ago, a young Irish worker was killed on the Mitchell Freeway. A 35-year-old man shouldn't die. And it is very sad for anybody to go and knock on that door to say, listen, your loved one is not having time. And what we have seen from the recent experience with the CFMEU, the construction division, placing false allegations, is the government intervention of a very militant union. They have stood for justice, for peace, against genocide, together with the maritime division. And this government and other governments don't like militant unions. They tolerate unions. And unions continue to be the most important mass organization for the working class. And it has to be defended, because strong unions will make a safer world. Definitely. So no question about it. But we need to work with them. We need to be able to bring together all those workers who need housing, who need food, who are indebted with big mortgages or rents, and be able to think about peace as well. And there are so many jobs there that are safe jobs, in education, in the environment, like a previous speakers have mentioned, and not necessarily the military. And we're talking with one of the workers the other day. He said, you know that the best nuclear country, you know which one it is? He says, no, tell me, the one that has no nuclear weapons. This surprised me with the comment, because really there is no place for nuclear. It's not safe, and we need to continue to lobby, to continue to campaign. At the moment, we are many individuals who belong to unions. We can lobby our leaderships, can lobby other members of other unions. But eventually, we need to come as a collective, and we need to continue to support the work of the IPAN, the Stop Aukus, in every centre where we have the opportunity to work together, and be sure that there is a future, not just for us, but for our children and our grandchildren, to leave something behind. We can't live with the submarines. We need to live peace. We need to live the ability to enjoy our future. Thank you.
To Sam. Sam's going to just address us about other anti-war groups.
Yeah, obviously one of the things that shaped our work in West Australia, I'm sure everywhere, is the genocide in Gaza. So, and it'd be fair to say that a number of the kind of initiatives and plans that we had in Stop Aukus have been sort of delayed or put on the back burner because so many of us have been joined into campaigning around Palestine. But in the longer term, this ghastly process that's unfolding in Gaza and elsewhere in Palestine precisely allows us to make a connection, actually, and to explain to people that Australia's almost absolute support for the United States and in turn its support for Israel is part of the logic of AUKUS. It's almost inconceivable that Australia would completely lock itself in, both politically and logistically, in terms of the interoperability of our armed forces with the United States, to the point that we're just going to automatically go along with the US attempt to confront China and even possibly drag us down the path of a hot war, and then disagree with the United States on another major point of geostrategic contention. It's just not going to happen. And I think we saw that in the recent vote at the United Nations, where a number of Western nations, for the first time, did actually vote that Israel should obey international law. Pretty simple thing, right? Not just Ireland, who you'd expect, but in a number of other Western countries, including Western countries that are actually even members of NATO. Think about Belgium, France, Spain, Portugal, Iceland, Norway, Finland, and closer to home, New Zealand and Japan. But not Australia. Australia abstains. And I say to people, this is the logic. This is the logic of Aukus, and to enable us to make that connection with the campaign for Palestine. In terms of things concretely that we've done to do that, Stop Aukus organised jointly with the Friends of Palestine group a protest outside the IODS Arms Conference here only a month or two ago, and that was really good, and we were able to make the connections. And probably about a month before that, I had the opportunity to represent Stop Aukus WA at one of the Palestine demonstrations, and to get people who are just mobilising around one issue or the other to realise that there's a connection. Of course, there's a practical interconnection as well, that many of the arms companies that we're talking about, BAE Systems, for instance, of course, are implicated in what Israel is doing, and are also part of our Aukus projects, because the weapons and armament industry is this integrated thing, and Israel is a central part of the Western arms industry as well. So you can't, the things are just inevitably sort of bound in together. And so I think there'll be opportunity for us to do actions, targeting a company like BAE Systems in the future as well, and to build on that connection.
We'll just hand over to Chris to mention another aspect of our campaigning, which is pretty laborious but incredibly necessary, and that's voicing opposition to Aukus via the parliamentary avenues and actions.
Yeah, just to briefly go over some of these activities, like we've been approaching politicians, mainly Labor politicians, with our questions of what is going on. Mostly they do not know, can't tell us. So we ask them to bring these questions to whatever parliament they go to. Also, Joe mentioned this so-called community consultation of the Defence Department, where the main people that actually walked in there were us. Because it wasn't advertised at all very well, and the questions we asked, most of the answers were, oh, it's not been decided yet, oh, don't know. But the Defence Department can tick the box of community consultation without actually doing any community consultation. Good on them. With Nuclear Free WA, we've been busy sending submissions on various inquiries going on. The Australian Naval Nuclear Power Safety Bill went through the lower house, has been in the Senate this year. Some of us went before a Senate committee and testified. A little bit of success in that the possibility of high-level waste from UK, US submarines will not be stored in Australia. And there's a few other little amendments and corrections of spelling. It's now back to the Senate to approve or otherwise these slight improvements. The Australian Submarine Agency had to apply to IPAN to get permission to store nuclear waste, and there was we put in submissions on this, but it was all rather farcical because IPAN was obviously under instructions not to grant this licence without too much worry. We've also, what they call a controlled environment facility is planned for Garden Island. What they mean by that is a place to store what they claim is low-level nuclear waste, but from submarines it could be intermediate-level nuclear waste. So that was, despite our submissions, that was approved to go ahead. And so they have started this, firstly, by splitting the approval process between, firstly, they just want permission to do dredging, piling, to build up the facilities at the Stirling Naval Base. Again, we put in our submissions, and there is a joint standing committee of the Parliament that we're invited to submit later this month. Also, the Stop Aukus, the Aukus treaty, which was asked for our comments, and of course they weren't very positive about that. So yeah, that's what we've been keeping us very busy. Yeah. Thank you. Over to Liam.
Hello, my peaceful friends. My name's Liam. I am from Nuclear Free WA and the Conservation Council of WA. I just want to pay credit to both Mia Pepper and Kelly Duckworth, whose work I'm actually presenting here today. Neither of them could make it along. So, under the Aukus proposals, there has been no proper case made in consideration of the ecological values, cultural values, social and economic issues, and the current users in the area. Meander, Garden Island, and A-Class Reserve, and Derbyl Narra, Coburn Sound, are both sensitive ecological systems which are made up of critically endangered ecological communities, highly endemic plant species, migratory species, priority fauna species, and diverse and significant marine species. This includes birds, the Tamar wallaby, snakes, and little penguins. Both are in close proximity to Shoalwater Islands Marine Park. The Department of Defence has control of the whole of Meander, but HMAS Stirling Naval Base currently only occupies approximately 30%. Of particular concern is how far the boundaries of HMAS Stirling as a designated zone could be extended to accommodate low-level waste or any other waste storage. The ecological values of Meander, the proximity to Derbyl Narra and Shoalwater Islands Marine Park, clearly make radioactive waste disposal here incompatible and unacceptable. There are recreation and commercial values of the area which are threatened by the presence of nuclear-powered submarines and foreign defence forces. Derbyl Narra is also intensively used for recreation. Many of our supporters who live in the region and frequent the area speak highly of the ecological values and the pristine environment at the island, describing the incredible experiences they have there with their families exploring nature. These values are precious, and despite ongoing assurances in community consultation forums that recreational access will be maintained, many of our supporters are already reporting changes to their accessibility because of activity and exclusions around the island. The presence of nuclear waste and nuclear-powered submarines dramatically changes the security needs of the area, and we anticipate this proposal will see a build-up of security led by foreign defence needs and security protocols. This area is not suitable for the presence of nuclear-powered submarines. I would argue that there is no area that is suitable for this, nor is it suitable for the maintenance activities or the storage of nuclear waste. The dredging required in the proposal to facilitate shipping to the proposed Westport terminal and to facilitate submarines entering the Sound poses immediate and significant risk to the marine life, from turbidity and impacts to seagrass to mobilising heavy metals, which we expect would bioaccumulate in the marine life. With significant recreational fishing in the area, this poses a public health risk. There are also concerns about the environmental impact the presence of the 700 plus foreign defence personnel will have. We are also aware that there are significant cultural stories connected to the island, and advocate for the strongest possible standards of heritage protection and working with First Nations communities in meaningful and participatory decision-making regarding the cultural heritage values. Part of the proposal for development at Meander was referred under the EPBC Act. Submissions closed on Tuesday just past, and we are strongly pushing for full environmental assessment. If there are any lawyers in the room, we're looking for advice on this in the case that they do not proceed to a full environmental assessment. So, is anyone here? We can talk over lunch. All of the processes required for the project, that being law reforms, licence applications, and now environmental assessment processes, have been cut up into bits and pieces. Nuclear Free WA, CCWA, and Stop Aukus WA have been vigilant in putting in submissions to each part, whether it's a joint standing committee on treaties inquiry, a public works inquiry, a PANZA consultation on waste storage, or EPBC referral. What has been lacking is full disclosure of the proposal, a clear plan on what will happen at the site, who is responsible for different parts of the proposal, who will pay, and what the impacts are or the justification is. Thank you.
And thank you for filling in so quickly at the last minute when you were needed. That's great. Stop Aukus WA is really well aware that the Stirling Garden Island base is not the only base of importance to Aukus in WA. And there's a few difficulties associated with the spread of bases that we have. One is the geographical distances. Kojarina near Geraldton is over 400 kilometres from Perth. The Harold Holt Station at Northwest Cape, Exmouth, is over 1,200 kilometres from Perth, and all the way through to Curtin is over 2,000 kilometres from Perth. So we have a number of bases, and there's more than those, spread out across this enormous state that we're in. Another difficulty we face is that these bases have been around for a long time, and locals are used to living with a neighbouring base, and they give them very little attention. So expansion doesn't really come onto their radar because of the lack of consultation that we've been talking about, but also quite often the destruction phase, there's a lot of relative secrecy around that. Mostly it's done with fly-in, fly-out workers, so this promise of local jobs is quite often never realised. Bases across WA will be an important part of our campaign, but we know there's still a lot of work to do in this space. We need to build networks to tackle this big picture across WA. And one of the first steps is going to be to identify allies. There is actually a lot in common across the communities with the base's expansion. The lack of consultation, the impacts on local communities, on housing and resources. And, for example, in Exmouth, they already have problems with potable water for the population that exists there already. So getting US Marines moving into their space is really going to make that quite critical. Heritage and environmental impacts and the risks local communities would experience when Australia cannot extricate itself from whatever military adventures the US embarks upon. So we have lots in common, but we do need to reach out and build these networks. There's environmental groups in these various centres, and of course our First Nations people who are quite often directly impact, and they're not consulted. The Curtin base, as an example, the traditional owners there have been trying to consult with Defence since 2014, and Defence says that they're consulting, but reports from the First Nations peoples there is that that basically the rhetoric, the action doesn't match the rhetoric from the Defence Department, and they disagree that consultation is taking place in the way that it should be. It's very superficial, and there's a power imbalance, of course, between the Defence Department and the traditional owners, and it's very hard for them to force that proper consultation. Anyway, so that's a big job for WA Stop Aukus going forward, and I'm going to hand over to Christopher to wrap up.
Thank you. Is that working? Yeah. Yes, what we're seeing happening here in this kind of brief report is that Aukus is actually creating an ecology for itself. When imperialists export troops, they don't just export troops, they also export capital. And when they export capital, they export ideas, and they change the way in which people think in the communities in which they operate. They've already changed the consciousness of the West Australian government. It no longer serves the interests of the West Australian people, if it ever did. What it now has constructed is what it calls the other force. The other force, alongside Army, Navy, space, all the rest of it, is now called defence industry. And defence industry has its own webpage, it has its own objective, and that objective is that Western Australia will be at the forefront of Australia's Aukus optimal pathway. We've already mentioned the fact that Western Australia has got highly developed robotics and AI mining technologies. Those are now going to be repurposed towards the military. So there is a complex issue here. It's not just the symptoms that we need to contest, it's also the cause that we constantly need to expose.
Thanks, Christopher. Yeah, just one other aspect of our campaigning, and this is the final one for today, has been, given the increasingly important parallel campaign with the militarism and education, which will largely be covered at tomorrow's session. But Erin, our Curtin student activist here, will just comment briefly on the Aukus links and the work of Curtin. Thank you.
Yeah, well, just for the national context before going into WA, people would have seen that when Anthony Albanese gave his announcement about Aukus in March last year, that within that he stated, working together, our universities and research institutes will collaborate to train more Australians in nuclear engineering. And basically since that announcement, we've seen a variety of developments in the university sector, shaping it towards becoming more militarised and geared towards Aukus. So in November last year, the government announced it would spend $128 million over 4 years to fund 4,001, I don't know why it's 4,001, but 4,001 new Commonwealth-supported places in STEM to help grow the skilled workforce required to deliver the Aukus nuclear-powered submarine pathway. Then when the Australian Universities Accord came out, which was sort of the big kind of reform package in higher education under Labor, it emphasised the need to enhance our defence capabilities through the university sector. And that means generally just more resources going towards STEM that is about defence. But specifically for Aukus, the University of South Australia will be developing degree apprenticeships to support the construction of nuclear-powered submarines. So soon after that came out, the Accords, Universities Australia announced that they were convening an Aukus roundtable. They're all very keen to get in on Aukus, which would bring together senior government officials from Aukus partner countries to drive deeper collaboration to support the delivery of the Aukus initiative. And then in March, the University of Sydney United States Studies Centre, which is a thing, they released a report titled The University Sector's Value Proposition for Aukus. And the main theme of that is also like how can we get Aukus countries to collaborate more in their university sectors to Aukus. So for example, compared to the UK and Australia, the United States, Australia is more behind when it comes to nuclear technologies in our universities. So bringing that knowledge into Australian universities. A very disturbing quote was, the Australian government will need over 2,000 engineers and scientists just to manage and oversee the engineering program for the Aukus submarines. Acknowledging Australia continues to slip further behind its peers in producing STEM-ready graduates, stakeholders, I hate reading these quotes, suggest a reappraisal of current incentives and agree on the need to address this issue from the primary and secondary school level. So we need to get them while they're young. Interestingly, the report doesn't just talk about training the Aukus workforce and developing new technologies. It also talks about the role universities can play in fostering the social license for Aukus. So it talks about the concern about falling public support for Aukus and the fact people have concerns about the safety of nuclear. So I think we can also expect humanities departments to play a role in the thing about the social license, getting more people open to the idea of war and of nuclear. And on the topic of trilateral cooperation, it's also come out recently that the US Defence Department has been sending millions of dollars to Australian universities. So since 2007, they've sent $394 million. To bring it back to WA, so Curtin University, where I study, so far has been the leading university in the state when it comes to Aukus, and I think they're quite a leading university across the country, really. So they announced in November last year that they would be part of the trilateral Aukus Workforce Alliance alongside the universities of Adelaide and New South Wales. This involves a partnership with a number of defence companies, so Babcock Australasia and Huntington Ingalls Industries, and they've also announced that BAE Systems will be joining this partnership. We don't know exactly when, but BAE is already an industry partner at Curtin. They provided a graduate program. So in the media release about the Workforce Alliance, it was said that the Australian Workforce Alliance will educate the thousands of qualified Australian engineering, maritime and nuclear trade and professional workers required to support the nation's nuclear-powered submarine enterprise from infrastructure, sustainment, supply chain through to disposal. At UWA, their main involvement in Aukus so far really has been through the Defence and Security Institute. So they've put on a few public events people might have seen, like the Aukus Pillar 1 Masterclass in August that we protested. And actually next Wednesday they're holding another masterclass for Aukus Pillar 2. And they also had a stall at the Indian Ocean Defence Conference that Sam mentioned, which Curtin was also a platinum sponsor of, which apparently means they would have spent about $18,000 to support that conference. And we also know that Curtin had a presence at the Land Forces Military Expo that people have spoken about, where Victoria Police unleashed a wave of violence on anti-war protesters. I think, the last thing to say is that even though there isn't really that much awareness of Aukus amongst students or about the sort of general slide to war, there is a growing awareness about the weapons ties that our universities have, mostly through research partnerships as opposed to investments like you see in the United States. Because a lot of these companies, as Sam said, sell weapons to Israel, who's committing a horrific war in genocide in Gaza, that more and more students are actually starting to follow just because of how absolutely morally horrific the whole thing is. And now we're seeing that violence extended into the West Bank and now Lebanon. So there's sort of an opening there to talk to students about, this is what war looks like. And actually there's a broader kind of gear up to war happening in society that you might not have been aware about. Because for a lot of students, there were kids during the war on terror, I was a kid then, I wasn't much aware of that. So war is still quite an abstract concept, I think, for a lot of young people, but it isn't so much anymore. So Students for Palestine has really led the campaign to demand that these ties be abolished. Ella will talk more about that tomorrow. But one of the demands at the encampment that I was involved in leading was to end Curtin's involvement in the Australia Workforce Alliance because of the links these companies have with Israel, but also because in general we don't want our education to be geared towards death and destruction. It should be geared towards things that are socially useful.
Thank you, Erin. And a really concerning report, because I'm pretty sure we need those STEM jobs for the climate catastrophe that we're facing, not for anything else. We have gone a little bit over time, so once again, we're probably going to miss out on our question and answer time because I don't want to disrupt people's lunch and then have the afternoon start late. So if you forgive us, I'll just say thank you to all the people from Stop Aukus WA.